your phones out and your ring lights. We about to go live. Come on your phone screen, man, we going live.
Welcome back to another episode of the Ty Brady Way. Today I have Nina Sossamon Pogue on the show, and I'm excited to interview you. Anytime we do this show, I always like to get a little bit of background. So welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've done, some accomplishments, and where you're at, and we'll go from there.
Well, hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on. My background is varied. I've had several big chapters in my life, I like to say. I was a member of the USA gymnastics team back in the 80s. And then I was a newscaster, a reporter and a newscaster for many years, and an Emmy award-winning news anchor. And then after that, I got into tech. I went from TV to tech and jumped into a friend's startup and stayed with it through the IPO and did the IPO roadshow and that whole thing as part of the leadership team of a software as a service, a big SaaS company. And then I got out of that and wrote a few books, and now I'm a full-time speaker. I speak on resilience. How do you, pick yourself up and keep going, but not just get up, but level up. And mostly I talk about my failures more than all those successes.
There's so much. I mean, just to be an athlete at that level, wow. I mean, my girls cheer. When did you finally say enough was enough? Because that's hard on your body. And then how did you get into, I mean, that's quite the pedigree there. You're like, okay, I'm an athlete to a news reporter. And then, so when did you transition from an athlete to a news anchor?
Yeah. So I spend a lot of time, I don't really, like I said, I talk more about my failures than my successes. So I was on the U.S. gymnastics team, moved away from home when I was 13 into the Olympic Training Center, like you hear about with these young girls. And then I made the U.S. team, went all over the world, Japan, Hungary, Germany, Australia. And then I didn't make the Olympic team. So big blow there, trying to figure out, what to do next. I felt like I was a failure at the ripe old age of 16, like I wasted my whole life sort of thing. And then I did go to college on a gymnastics scholarship. I went to LSU. I was a top recruit, went to school. And then I blew out my knee in college. And that's when I had to figure out who I was without gymnastics.
Yeah.
And fortunately for me, after making some really poor decisions for a little while, I like to say I graduated in booze and boys, after making some not so good decisions for a while, then I, I found television. I found I got an opportunity to work in a newsroom. I worked for sports information, obviously, because that was what I knew was sport. And I did all the minor sports, what they call, diving, track and field, women's volleyball, all the stuff that, you don't see. It's not just football, baseball, basketball. So I did a lot of reporting on that and found journalism, and I love television. So going from an athlete to TV was just another way to push myself, compete. Yeah. So to keep my scholarship, I had to work for the university, and I became a reporter, a sports reporter, with both first the university and then with the local TV station there. And I just fell in love with television. Once I went into my first newsroom, it was real competitive, a lot of adrenaline and high stakes, kind of like being an athlete. And so I did that for a lot of years. But that transition from gymnast, athlete to the, real world, as you would say, like to another career, was really a difficult time. It was, I didn't know who I was without my sport. I had to figure out who was Nina without that piece of me. Like nowadays, it's your Instagram and your TikTok. Back then, it was like my sweatshirt and my bumper sticker, but it was a big transition to figure that out.
How did you figure that out? I mean, you may have felt like your identity had been lost. I mean, it's all you knew, right?
Yeah.
What were the steps you went through?
Well, it was interesting. When I first blew out my knee, they had me working in the laundry room to keep my scholarship, not washing cute little leotards either. I was in the laundry room washing all of the athletes' stuff. And so I sometimes joke my claim to fame was almost that I washed Shaquille O'Neal's jockstrap. But thank goodness I found my way out of the laundry room. But I had an athletic advisor. And back then they didn't have anybody with mental health or anything like that, just an academic advisor. And that academic advisor would come by the laundry room every once in a while. And sooner or later, I opened up to him and I said, and he was the first person to ask me, what do you want to do after this? And I'd honestly never thought about it. And he encouraged me to do some thinking. And that's when the opportunity came up to move me from the laundry room into sports information. And then I just fell in love with that piece, that storytelling. And every day's different. Every day's very competitive in the news business. So that piece of it really clicked for me.
You just had somebody have a conversation and said, hey, what made you reflect on where do I want to take this? And then somebody gave you an opportunity. Well, another opportunity.
Well, it didn't just give me an opportunity. I mean, I did all the crappy jobs. So I worked in sports information for a little bit. And I was in college and kind of fumbling my way through and barely making my grades. I mean, I had a whole year there where I was really barely going to class. I used to joke I would like take my Percocet with a shot of Jaeger and roll myself, into physical therapy, not in a good mood at all. So I don't want you to think that it was an easy transition. I did a lot of things wrong. And I was really not fun to be around. But this one individual happened to take the time to stop by that laundry room over and over and finally get me to open up and say, usually, he'd say, how are you doing? And I'd go, great. Everything's perfect. Look at me. But I finally opened up and said, not great, I guess. And he got me thinking about what else I might be good at. And then I got a job writing stories for the minor sports. And then it's an interesting thing. Luck meets preparation. I mean, opportunity meets preparation is what I call luck. I started dating a guy. Got into the gym. I got into bodybuilding for a while. And this is about a year or so after my injury. And I started dating a guy who was a personal trainer to one of the people who worked at the TV station's wife and got an introduction to someone there. And then my first job in television, I worked in a archive closet, logging tapes. And then I got to pull cords and run the teleprompter. And I did every job nobody else wanted for about a year before I actually got to do some reporting. And then another year or so before I got to be on air as a reporter. So it wasn't and that was the crappy weekend gigs doing the Crowley Rice Festival down in Louisiana somewhere.
That is so true. Sometimes you often hear me say you have to embrace the suck, right? You have to embrace it because everybody has to start somewhere. Yeah. And you look at the life of social media, and a lot of times you see just the highlight reel, but everybody has stuff. Everybody has trauma, right? Everybody has issues, but you don't ever often hear about that.
No, and that's why sorry, I stepped on you there.
I just say, no, that's why I said, I'm glad you're talking. I want to talk about my failures. It's great.
Yeah. And that's why I went down that road. People see me as this, the successes that I've had. And I call that your resume. We've all got one of those, the things you would see on LinkedIn or if you applied for a job, the stuff we're proud of. I call it your reverse resume, all the stuff that you did that does not show up there. All the stuff below the line of your timeline. That's the stuff you survived. If you were bullied, if you failed something, if you dropped out of school, if you had an addiction, all the stuff you've gotten through goes in the bottom part of that. And that really makes you who you are. So I not only didn't make the Olympic team, then while I was in college, I blew out my knee in college and lost my sport. And then after that, I was on television and I got fired at one point. They went younger and blonder when I turned, in my 30s. And I'd gone through a divorce and I've gone through some other trauma. It's all the stuff you've been through, and we all have it, that really makes us who we are, more so than the things that we just achieve.
It's character building, right? It's that character building we have to go through, because I believe I wouldn't be the person I am today had I not experienced some of those things in my life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You don't learn much from things when you get it right. It's like when I was an athlete. Think about an athlete. All day long, you go practice your routines and your coaches tell you what you're doing wrong to correct it. Tell you what you're doing wrong. Jump higher, straighten your leg, twist later. You're constantly getting corrections. If you're in any sport, same thing. throw the ball differently. I don't know, other sports as well. But you get corrections. When you get it right, you don't get a correction. So in life, all of those corrections, all the times you get it wrong, you really learn a lot more from that.
You go through, one of the things I was going to say too is my wife still competes in bodybuilding. She's a master's, she's over 40. And so she competes in, masters bikini, and, she's actually going to compete in 6 weeks. So it's,
That's tough.
yeah, I was going to say anybody that does that, especially from a spouse watching and seeing and the ups and downs and the highs and lows. And it's fascinating what you can do with your body though at the same time.
Yeah, it's so much discipline. So much discipline.
And it's a world in its own. And a lot of times those people say that it's a lifestyle, right? Because it really is a lifestyle.
Yeah, well, good luck to her. That is a tough thing to do, especially in the Masters. I think it's harder on our bodies, harder to do and get our bodies to react how we want it to as we get older.
Absolutely. So you get out of broadcasting. How did you transition from broadcasting to going to a tech company, and what was your role there?
So in tech, this was interesting. I was a popular news anchor in Charleston, South Carolina, and I'd done a lot of work, and I worked in a lot of nonprofits. And a buddy of mine who had been on a couple of nonprofit boards with me had a startup. He had a software as a service startup early in the day where SaaS was young, before we even called it cloud, cloud computing, back when we were trying to figure out what to call it. So 2006, 7, 8. And Google bought YouTube. And then he went, I need to figure out how to do video better. And so we had a couple coffees and lunches, and I was sharing with him what it took to create content, like edit a video, what producers did, just everything about the news business. And then he decided he wanted somebody to come jump in and create video and media content for his software platform. And so he gave me a great opportunity to step away and do that. It was a big risk on my part, but I was getting older and kind of finished being on air. I was ready to be behind the scenes. And so I went from TV to tech, and I started off just standing up a communications media department for him, and then learned quickly, and became a more integral part of the leadership team. And then by the time we went public in 2013, I was a vice president of marketing, communications, and media. And so I was a big part of that IPO roadshow, which was just a fascinating thing to be a part of. But yeah, so from TV to tech was really a leap of faith, and jumping into a friend's tech company, and it was a wonderful opportunity. And I did what a lot of people do. I said, where's the money going to be down the road? I wasn't stupid. Like,
show me
technology.
The money. Show me the money.
Yeah. I mean, there's money. It was healthcare technology. There's money in healthcare, and there's money in tech. And the TV business was going the other direction because everybody was, had the news in their pocket, and they weren't watching the evening news like they used to.
What were some challenges in a startup? I mean, you used the word risk. You took a big risk, and I don't think anybody gets anywhere without taking a risk. I mean, I wouldn't be where I'm at if I didn't take a risk, right? So what were those first couple of years like? Because I believe the first 2 to 3 years are absolutely the hardest. And then at some point you have a breakthrough, right? And then, so what was that like?
Yeah, well, not much transfers from television to tech. And I didn't know anything. I think I just there was so much learning to do, so much new information and new understanding that I had to come up with. I think the most important thing that I did that anybody can do is I got really comfortable not knowing, not being the smartest one in the room, asking lots of questions. My whole first year was just me asking questions and being comfortable not knowing, and going to meetings and listening and taking notes, and then going and looking up what the words meant in the meetings. I didn't know the words around sales and revenue. I didn't know the words, any of the language around platform technology. I didn't understand what release schedules were in software. I just had a lot of learning to do. So the first year or so was getting really comfortable with not knowing after being in television for years and knowing everything about that. I could have done I did my television job in my sleep practically. I had done 3 shows a day for almost, for about 18 years. So it was easy for me. So that switch was getting really uncomfortable with not knowing what I need, not knowing the answers to a lot of questions. But I learned fast. And the more I learned and the more I leaned in and the harder I worked, the better I got.
Wow. So you get into it 3 years. You're like, okay, you finally feel like you've got your feet under you. What was it like when I guess you got the reward? The reward was going IPO, right? What was that like? Was it like the almost like winning a Super Bowl, I guess, or getting on the gymnastics team, the Olympic, yeah.
Yeah, well, it was even when I look at my lifetime, it was a bigger opportunity and a bigger win. I came on board for not just the paycheck, but for the long-term wealth. So I got options. I got stock options when I came on board. So I was very much invested in the success of the company. And that's one of the reasons I'm sure the CEO put me in charge of running parts of the IPO, the marketing and comms part of it, because he knew that I would wake up in the middle of the night worried and invested in this as much as he was, because it was an opportunity for me as a person to go from debt to wealth, because I didn't grow up with money, and I was very careful with my money, and I was very careful with the company's money, and I could see how this could change my life. So I had a lot of options, and for me, winning, like making the U.S. team, that was all about me and making my coaches proud, my family proud. But this, when I had, 3 kids and a husband, and like the opportunity to be able to change their world, not just mine, was really different. So the work I did there and the commitment there was my kids are going to get to go to any college they want to go to. They're going to live a different life than I grew up with. I was a Navy brat. I mean, I have a bad life, but I was a military brat and youngest of 4 kids. Moved all the time. I'm like, this gives my kids a chance to stay in one spot, go to any college they want, have the things I couldn't have. And so it did. I was very, very committed to it, and it was harder than anything I'd ever done. I didn't realize how hard it was, and there's so little information about what an IPO roadshow looks like or what an initial public offering even is. I didn't know. I was learning as I did it, and then flying up to New York and meeting with Goldman Sachs people and learning that as I did it too. But I was very keenly aware, like so hyper focused on how this could change my world. So it was a bigger win than any of the other things I'd done. Winning an Emmy Award for being best newscaster in the Southeast, that was just a piece of metal that went on my wall, and it was all about me. This was really different. It was about making a change for my family.
Well, I think, for the family and the people that were employees of it, right? And
Oh
you're
my
able to
gosh,
live
yeah.
a lasting legacy that, I mean, is life changing.
Yeah, and I had a day, we had sometimes when things were not going well, or you have a big client who's upset, or you don't quite have it right, you can't figure out your TAM, your total addressable market, or something like that with the information that you're dealing with. Just things were hard, and I can remember driving onto the campus of this software company, because by then we had several hundred people there, close to 1,000 people at the company. And I can remember looking at all those cars in the parking lots thinking, I can't screw this up, because look at all of those car payments and mortgages and those
Oh,
other colleges. Like, it's a lot of pressure of a leader when you're a leader of a company like that, driving and just going, oh, if I screw this up, there's all those car payments and mortgages. Those are families depending on me to get this right.
that gave me chills. They're
It's
just
just
humbling.
It really was. And there were times when we were struggling and I was just like sick at my stomach thinking there's no option but to get this right. We have to. And not just because I loved some of these people. They became like family. There's a lot I didn't even know. I just knew they were counting on us to have some success here.
And so you go IPO, and now you decide, hey, you write a book, you become a speaker, you're able to live a legacy for your family. The next 3 to 5 years, where do you see yourself going with your speaking, and what impact are you wanting to make? besides what you've already done?
Well, I feel like I'm at a really interesting tipping point right now. I've worked years on the research around resilience and what it means. What are the commonalities? People who don't just get up and over and over, but actually level up and become resilient. Not persistence is one thing. Persistence is you fall down, you get back up. That's persistence. You keep going. Resilience is really different. It's your ability to learn, grow stronger, and adapt in a positive way to whatever happens in life. And that adapt piece is what I've been researching and finding the commonalities of what do people do who adapt. What does that look like to adapt in a positive way? So now that I have this framework and this message to share, I'm doing a lot of speaking and working on my third book. And I do it in two ways. So I do a really personal, like I have an online workshop called the Now What Workshop, just like when life hits the fan, the stuff hits the fan, maybe get fired or break up or something, or trauma in your life. It's just the Now What Workshop. Let me get you to a better place so you don't get stuck there. That's real personal. And then on the corporate side, I'm doing corporate resilience. So mergers and acquisitions or companies going through big product stuff. I can jump in and go, hey, this is how your body works, reacts to change. This is why your brain doesn't want to do this. This is, why it's hard and why you want to run in the other direction. But let me show you how to, buckle down and actually get through this and not just survive it, but thrive on the other side.
I would say there's a lot of similarities.
That message out now that I know it.
And I would say there's a lot of similarities with the direction you've gone in your life with being resilient. You've that framework you talked about is, I did like it. What's next? So many people will lose a job, right? They may lose a child. They may go through a divorce, right? Whatever you're talking about, but what's next? How do they work through that? Again, it goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier. Everybody has stuff, right? How would you tell somebody that's going through stuff like today, to start today? What would you tell them to do?
Well, my mashup is a mix of stoicism and neuroscience and my own experience and my research. And it's four things. It's this, whatever this is that you're going through. THIS is the acronym I use. So it's your this. My first book is This Is Not the End, whatever this is that you're going through. But it's THIS, and the T is timeline. So put it in that, look at your big, messy, marvelous life, as I like to say. You can take a piece of paper and turn it sideways and put a line across it and put 10 dots across that line. That's when you're 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, all the way to let's pretend we live to be 100. And I think I need to drink less wine and take better care of myself, but I'm going to pretend that I'm going to live to be 100. So let's say we do. And then you can put a dot on that line, on that timeline somewhere where you are right now. So I'm in my 50s. My dot would be there, wherever your dot is. And then this timeline thinking is this perspective piece. So this is the first part. Put whatever problem you're dealing with on the dot on that line. And it gives you the ability to say, okay, I'm right here. And then you can look at all the blank space ahead. There's nothing in front of it. Everything you've done up till now has brought you to that dot. But then you have all this blank space ahead that's yours to do what you want with. And so I have people, this is where I can have them pull in their behind it, like put their resume above it, the line, put their reverse resume, all the crap they've gone through down below the line. But then there's this dot and everything in front of it's blank. So that's the perspective piece. That's the T. And sometimes it's hard to see that there's blank space ahead when you're in the middle of it. And then the H is humans. I always say draw a circle around that dot and figure out who's going to come in the circle with you. Because people who are resilient don't go it alone. So is this friends, family, therapist? Don't try to go it alone. Someone's got to be in that circle with you to help you. And sometimes I'll have people edit their people, draw and go, okay, everybody in your life is either helping or hurting. You have to put them in one category or the other. And even the people who love us the most sometimes aren't helping.
Yes.
So, yeah. So you have to put them in one side or the other. Who's helping, who's hurting. And then you have to decide who is going to be in that circle with you. So if you don't have anybody in that circle with you who's helping, that's a problem. You got to pull in find a mentor or a therapist or somebody. So that's the human piece. That's the TH, timeline, and then pull in humans. And then I say isolate it. And on that same piece of paper, you draw a line in front and in back, up and down, your parallel lines, up and down on your page, in front of and in behind that dot. And you can't talk about what happened before. You know, the woulda, shoulda, couldas. That's where any good therapist will tell you that if you spend all your time thinking about before, that's where depression lives. You can't think over there. And then on the other side, you can't think about the what ifs and the doomsday scenarios and all the future, because that's where anxiety lives, you know. So you have to go in between those lines. What are we actually dealing with right now? What can we actually do right now? And then the last thing, that's the I, the isolated. Let's figure out what exactly we're dealing with, not before, not after, but what are we dealing with right now? And then the S is story. What are the words in your head that come out of your mouth that become the story you tell about this, whatever this is that you're dealing with? And you can't do all the self-sabotage stuff. This is where we edit the language in our head. So you can't overgeneralize. This always happens to me. You can't catastrophize. Like everything's ruined.
It'll never work, right?
Yeah, it'll never work. And you can't, and all of that, you can't exaggerate. I got a million things to do. It's editing the language in your head. So that's the story piece. This is what, and find some words that fit that you can say out loud that feel okay. Like, this is a crappy chapter. This is not what I expected. Like, it's got to be something that you can say out loud that is not self-sabotaging. So that's it. THIS, timeline, humans, isolated, craft that story. And I have people work through that framework, and I've actually done it with people on the back of a napkin in a bar and help them think, okay, this is where you are and what you're dealing with and what you can work with. And it's not your whole world. It is just one part of your big, messy, marvelous life. And that helps also, it helps you look at it like it's just a chapter in your story. It's not your whole story, whatever it is. Crappy chapter, mostly, but it's just a chapter.
As I get the privilege of interviewing some very, very, very successful people on my show, and this show's just taken on a mind of its own, I can't help but wonder and think that most people that have made it on the other side, they provide a lot of service, and they want nothing better than to make a bigger impact in this world. And as you sit there and tell me about, you know, the storyline and what people go through and the framework, is fascinating to me. I'm so glad you shared it.
Well, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to share it and for trusting me with your listeners. That's always a privilege. So I hope it's helpful.
Oh, it will be. I guarantee it. There isn't a day that goes by that somebody doesn't comment. I may be walking in a grocery store. I may be at an event and somebody says, I listened to episode such and such about such and such, and it really helped me through the day, or, you know, it's what I needed that day. And that's what it's about. Just giving back.
I love that. Mm-hmm.
Any last thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience? And again, most people I could interview for an hour, 2 hours, and just pull stuff from your life experiences that could relate to so many people. But any last thoughts?
Yeah, I always like to end, or at least get in there, that it is okay to not be okay. We all go through stuff. It's okay to not be okay, but it is not okay to stay that way. And it is up to each of us to get ourselves out of whatever funk we're in. So it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. And you, listener, you, whoever, are in charge of figuring out how to get yourself moving forward.
So there'll be links on the show that you can connect with Nina. We'll put links if you want to put your if you have an audio book or books they could download on Amazon or wherever they could get it. But I appreciate taking the time out of the day. Again, it's a privilege to interview you. I'm glad you wanted to be on the show to get you in front of my audience and my people. And thank you